We did it. We made it. It is Friday. We are here with, well, of course, directly to it's my right, your left, or the other way around. The babyface assassin himself, Brock Vieira, who is back to his coach killing ways. And we'll find out if there's anyone in the Big 12 who's about to get the heave ho from one Mr. Brock Vieira. And then directly, down there beneath me, we are joined by, if you love tortillas, if you love takes, if you love tortillas and takes together, and Big 12 football, and most importantly, Texas Tech Big 12 football, you have come to the right place because we're joined by the one, the only Mr. Albie Shore. Ladies and gentlemen, let's do it. So, I have it on good authority, Mr. Albie Shore, that the Big 12 is, and I'm going to quote, definitely a top three conference. So we'll start with that. Is the Big 12 indeed a top three conference? And if so, why?
So first and foremost, Bill, as always, incredible introduction. Like that's top tier. This is why I come on the pod. Like this is great introduction. No notes. You're the man. Both you and Brock. But yeah, I mean, I think it's easily like if we're just talking this year, I think it's a top three conference, right? But if we're talking just in perpetuity and just as conferences are aligning, and as you know, the Big Ten and SEC kind of separate themselves. It's you comparing the Big 12 really to the ACC and then the others. And the ACC right now doesn't even know if it's going to be around in 5 years. Like the second that they decided to go out and pull two teams from the West Coast that nobody else wanted and a random school in Dallas that nobody else wanted, they relinquished their fight in the contest between them and the Big 12, right? Like 4 schools on the West Coast said, you know what? We'd rather go to this conference than even try and attempt an ACC appearance. So like that in general has the Big 12 on top. But if we're talking about this year in particular, the fact that the one school the ACC had that was like, hey, regardless, we got Florida State. Florida State should be a top 10 team coming into the year. Big 12, I ain't got nobody as good as Florida State. And then Florida State's the laughing stock of the country. Right. So like that alone brings them down. Meanwhile, the two schools that I think Texas Tech kind of boosted up coming into the year, Kansas State and Utah, still show to be both pretty good. Like they both have come out and said, hey, we're supposed to be the two flag bearers of the conference. And both of us are doing not too shabby. Both of us are doing well. Both of us still look to be teams that are going to contend for the college football playoff, to where on the other side, the ACC just ain't got it.
Well, I guess the controversy is officially over, Brock. We've now been told that it is official. We've got the Big 12 in, I think the racing tournament is in drafting position behind either the SEC or the Big 10. Okay, let's dig into, first so Brock has any questions, we'll start digging into week 4 and then we'll talk Texas Tech. Do you have any questions before we jump into week 4 in the Big 12?
No, I don't have anything to ask before we do that, so let's just jump into that, and that's where I will start with my first question. And that is, Albie, what is going on with Texas Tech? I had you guys as like an 8-win team entering this season. Maybe something special could happen. Really good quarterback situation. Really good running back situation. Entering the season, the play calling remains suspect as always. Joey McGuire seems on his way out. You guys got absolutely embarrassed in Pullman. Not saying that to insult, just saying that to illustrate a point, which is what is going on, because these things should not be happening.
Yeah, so one thing, you're right about everything except for one. Joey McGuire's not going anywhere because he does everything you want your head coach to do, or at least at Tech so far, right? Like his first 2 years, it was our first back-to-back 8-win seasons or 7-win seasons in like over a decade since Leach was here, right? He had a winning record in conference in his first 2 seasons since Leach was here. Like it won't be McGuire. McGuire has, 2 of the highest recruiting classes in Texas Tech history. Like McGuire has actually a pretty long leash. The guy who's on the hot seat, and you mentioned it with the play calling, is Zach Kittley, the offensive coordinator. He's the guy that I think right now is coaching for his job. But I think both McGuire and the defensive coordinator, Tim DeRuyter, has gained some leeway a little bit. Though I will say the honeymoon period is absolutely over. I think everybody that were infatuated with Joey McGuire in his first year, when he was yelling out things like everybody in the Big 12 is going to know that the Big 12 runs through Lubbock and all this other stuff, like that, everybody, we're done. Like Texas Tech fans, for the most part, they're done with the Joe McGuire isms. They're done with all the fourth down attempts. Like they're as far as the honeymoon period, everyone's over it, right? And you mentioned after Pullman, it was a lot of the reporters, which Lubbock area reporters don't push the needle very much, right? Like they don't really, you're not going to see them have a breaking news story. They're very much pretty program friendly. And even after that game against Washington State, even they were pushing back of like, what the hell's going on, Joey? Brock, you didn't even mention we beat Abilene Christian by 1 point. Worse than the Pullman one.
Yeah,
we beat Abilene Christian by 1 point. You didn't even mention that piece. All right, like that was so much. I expected us to lose against Washington State, to be honest. I know a lot of people didn't. I was somebody that actually predicted Washington State to win the game because I think Washington State's been a little underrated by the national media and by most people. I think that though they lost a lot of talent, like Texas Tech's leading receiver Josh Kelly, and the Heisman hopeful and Cam Ward, they still had a lot of talent on the team. And Mateer, the quarterback for Washington State, proving to be pretty decent in his own right. But I never could have imagined we'd only beat Abilene Christian by 1 point, right? And to your point, Brock, we didn't just lose to Washington State; we got embarrassed by Washington State. So what you're hoping, however, is last week against North Texas, though it is North Texas, a team that just beat Abilene Christian by a point, I'll take it how I can get it. They tied school records, right? 35 points in the second quarter, 5 touchdowns there. They had scored 3 touchdowns in less than a minute at one point, tied a school record for most points in a half, having 52 points in that first half. Like everything was cooking on all cylinders in the last game against North Texas. And as Tech fans, I think, or at least I can speak for myself and say that at least that game made me breathe easy. I'm like, okay, like that's at least a game that not only did we win, but we won the way you would expect Texas Tech to win against North Texas. So now this week we play Arizona State, and this is really, I think, the game. Arizona State was picked to finish dead last in the conference,
which I didn't understand. I just want to add that. Like that made no sense to me.
Yeah, well, yeah, and so I will say Arizona State I think is also a bit underrated, but now they come into this game, they're 3-0, right? And I think some people and even we talked about this on the pod at the Tortillas and Takes podcast, plug. That Arizona State did just barely beat Texas State on the road. That's a good Texas State team. They were underdogs in that game. So like you look at it and you say, oh well, they just barely beat Texas State. Like they were supposed to lose. And they found a way to win on the road in Texas. And so they were 2.5-point underdogs against Texas State. Funny enough, they're 3-point underdogs against Texas Tech. So they're in a very similar situation in this game. So as Tech fans, there's a little bit concerned, but I do think if Tech does the same thing they did against North Texas, against Arizona State, and prove that, okay, the first 2 games, we've righted the ship. We're now in a situation where we're better. Come hop back on the bandwagon. It's good. But at this point, you don't know which Tech team you're getting. Really, I would say argue up until this Saturday. I think Saturday is going to tell us everything we need to know about this team.
So I kind of want to go back to a point we said earlier. And I agree with pretty much everything you said. I thought Washington State was going to win too. I just didn't expect it to be that much of a differential in talent, especially more of a lacking of proficiency offensively, I guess, where my concern kind of came from. And going on with that, Kitley, if I said his name correctly, I apologize if I didn't, has been a guy that's been heavily criticized for years now. How does he still have a job? That's kind of my main question for you. I don't understand he can be so mediocre for so long and still get paid. It's bizarre to me, and that's why I contribute that Joey McGuire.
I think this is like the third time I've been on this podcast. You've asked me that question all 3 times.
Yeah, we still haven't found the answer. I'm still looking for it. Like, it's a Northwest Passage of college football.
McGuire is very loyal. I do think this is it. I do think if something doesn't shake this year, when you know who your quarterback is from day one, it's a guy that was a former 4-star quarterback, one of the highest rated quarterbacks in Texas Tech history, higher rated than Pat Mahomes, higher rated than Baker Mayfield. Like we already know what this guy can do. We've seen it before. So now it's like, okay, we know what he can do. You mentioned our running back, Todd Brooks, one of the best running backs in the country, right? Josh Kelly was a stud out in Washington State last year, and so far, so he's been good. So you can't really blame your skill guys. Right, the O-line is going to be the O-line. It is what it is. They're not great, but it is what it is there. But you got to find a way to make something shake. Now, this is you at this point. We can't go year in and year out questioning offensive play calling, questioning what Kittley can do. And funny enough, we mentioned it for that. One of the biggest reasons I think they were so successful offensively against North Texas was they just kept it simple. They stopped all this and I think this is something that in college football in general, a lot of offensive coordinators have gotten way too cute with this, pre-snap motions and, all these misdirections and these counters and this, that, and the other. Against North Texas, we just said, hey, Taj Brooks, you're a very good running back that can run over half that defense. Go do it. Line up, single back. We didn't do a lot of we've never done I formation as long as I can remember. But single back, right? Run up or a nice little dive. Run up the B gap, the C gap. Let's do a stretch play. Let's do just something simple. When it comes to passing routes, let's do slants. We're not doing all these fancy. Let's do some drag routes, some slants, some post routes. Like eliminate all the foolishness and let's just go out there and play football because we're better than the other team, right? And that's what I saw against North Texas. That's what I want to see against Arizona State. Stop all the cute stuff. Just go win.
Yeah, and you brought up a great point. I think that's a larger point in college football. I agree with you. I think there is too much cuteness in offensive play calling and offensive schemes, too much pre-snap motion, too much misdirection, too much stay-up formation and looking to the side for a new play. And most importantly, I feel that offensive coordinators are so scared to push the ball upfield, especially through the air now, because they're so afraid of a turnover, that they're somehow decided that the better solution is to run horizontally. And I don't know if people in America know this, especially the coaches, to score a touchdown, you got to go this way, not this way, right? And that's something that I'm fearing with Texas Tech is that you guys have tremendous skill players still, and you're not pushing upfield. How does that change and things like that? I know we can't answer that because, again, I wanted to ask you this question for the past 3 years, if the solution was on the horizon. But that's just a concerning thing for me when it comes to Tech going forward. Another big concerning thing for me for Tech is I get what you're saying about Jordan McGuire. He did get the 8-win seasons. He is really good at high school recruiting. He's great with people. He's great with the boosters. Blah-de-blah-de, hoo-ha, la-da-da. But you were supposed to build upon that win against Ole Miss in the bowl game 2 years ago. That was when your program was supposed to be a burgeoning program. And then what has happened after that? It's been disaster after disaster after disaster. You lose in Laramie. You supposed to be, or you were in position, I should say, to be Oregon, and you didn't even cover the spread. Like, how does that even happen? And you fumble on this way last year. You beat Cal in the bowl game. Boo-hoo. Somehow Cal has just done a tremendous PR, rework of themselves. Good job, Golden Bears. But then you feel like Tech is just continuing to be stagnant. I don't understand how the people of Lubbock, especially the people with money in Lubbock, can tolerate that when Texas Tech is in position to be a perennial playoff team.
Yeah, luckily for Joey.
What I want to say.
Luckily for Joey, we've been beaten down bad for a good decade. So when you've been beaten down bad, you're like, hey, you've had a lot of terrible girlfriends. The one that are, girls that they get beaten by all these boyfriends, and the one that just doesn't beat them, they're just like, oh, okay, I guess this is my life now. That's how we are as Tech fans. We're just like, this relationship ain't great, but it ain't Matt Wells. It ain't Cliff Kingsbury. So I mean, he is gonna have a pretty long leash.
So instead of getting whacked in the face, you get yelled at.
Yeah, exactly.
That's better.
It's he's gonna have that leash. I think it's something drastic is gonna have to happen before he's actually on the hot seat. But there's no doubt that things have to change. Cody Campbell is probably the biggest booster we have. He recently got the field named after him, and he's a former Texas Tech player in his own right. And so, no doubt, Cody Campbell has meetings with McGuire. Like, nah, this ain't gonna fly. I almost guarantee you he had a meeting after that Washington State game. I almost guarantee you had a meeting after that Wyoming game last year. Certain things that's just not gonna fly. But I think McGuire is just. He's going to be here for a little bit. But it's certain things are just going to have to fix their ways. And I think really it starts on the offensive side of the ball. But one thing you did say that I do want to mention is, for real though, shout out to Cal. Cal, I didn't even know Cal had fans like that. But Cal Twitter, right? The last like month or two, I'm like, oh man, this is crazy. Y'all switched up since you went to the ACC. Listen, I make fun of y'all going to the ACC, but something about this. I like Antifa Cal. Okay, I can take this.
Yeah, when they march into woke Campbell Stadium tomorrow. Cal, great job. And what were you doing, Pac-12? If we had Cal Twitter back then, I think the Pac-12 could have survived. But that's neither here nor there. I kind of want to move on to my final point about Texas Tech, and then to move on to the rest of the conference. There are so many great coaches at the G5 level right now, especially in the state of Texas. And I'm surprised Texas Tech isn't willing to even have a discussion about replacing Joe McGuire for. There's two coaches in particular I want to mention. Jeff Traylor at UTSA, I think, is a guy that's been a name for it's been around, but at the same time, he's very dedicated to the San Antonio community, so I can see why there's hesitancy on both sides. But like we mentioned earlier, in San Marcos, G.J. Kinney is a coach on the rise. I've been saying this for years now, and we are seeing it. They have one of the most prolific passing attacks in all of college football. They know how to spread and shred teams at every single level. They have multiple wins over Power 5 opponents in the past 2 years. Last year, they went to a bowl game and then won. Why wouldn't Texas Tech want to go after a guy like that when you're seeing a Tech team now under McGuire start to stagnate?
So G.J. Kinney is an interesting one. I will say this about Jeff Traylor. Jeff Traylor, if he wanted the Texas Tech job, he would have had it 3 years ago. It was a terribly kept secret that it was offered to him. He didn't accept it. It just didn't feel right at the time for him. And he did, like you mentioned before, he is kind of dedicated to that San Antonio community, or at least the Central Texas community. Wink, wink. A&M. So G.J. Kinney is an interesting one. I have already started calling him the future head coach of the Baylor Bears. I do think it's only a matter of time before one, the Bears looking for a new head coach, and two, that Kinney's getting that promotion. But I do think Kinney is an interesting one. He is definitely, again, former player. He's a guy that knows his offense and also knows the landscape of the new college football period, right? The guy that preceded him didn't even recruit high school players because didn't really know what he was doing. Kinney knows how to work that balance of great high school recruiting and transfers. Also, one thing that's really important, and I think it's something that McGuire is at least one of the reasons why he's successful in recruiting to Lubbock, but Kinney also has realized this, is how to recruit to the school you're at, right? Texas State, for some reason, has always struggled with recruiting. Don't know why. I personally think San Marcos is the best college town in the state. I think San Marcos is incredible. However, for whatever reason, every single coach has ever been the head coach of the Texas State Bobcats has struggled to recruit. They can't get guys over there except for G.J. Kinney. He's found the magic sauce and a way to make sure that everybody knows what's special about Texas State. And one of the reasons why I think G.J. Kinney is almost guaranteed to leave, whether it's to Baylor, Tech, U of H already for some reason, Texas State they don't put money in the program. I don't know why they don't. Their stadium looks nice, but outside of that, they just don't really put money. And maybe they're starting to now with Kinney's success, but they just don't put money in the program. And eventually, you're gonna get tired of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's definitely something to keep an eye out as we move forward. And I'm gonna stop hopping on your Tech for right now. I want to go to probably what is the biggest game in the conference this week. That's Oklahoma State and Utah. I want to get your thoughts on that game. And is Oklahoma State a legitimate contender for the Big 12 this year?
Unfortunately. Yeah, I think I'm not going to call this a weed out game because I think even the loser of this game still stays a contender for the conference. But I do think that this is a game that gives a real big step up for whoever wins it. Right, like I mentioned before, Utah and K-State being the two teams that are kind of the flag bearers of the conference, but right behind them is Oklahoma State, I would say. Right, like Oklahoma State, that team is really good. That team was really good. Like last year was supposed to be a down year for Oklahoma State. They were supposed to suck last year. And Gundy, I hate the guy, but he just knows how to coach college football. He knows how to make the Oklahoma State Cowboys better than they're supposed to be. Alan Bowman looked awful at the beginning of the year, and he still doesn't look good. But every game he plays for Oklahoma State, he looks a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. Maybe that's what happens when you turn 40. But he
also has one of the best wide receiving cores in all college football teams.
Yeah, for sure. Like no doubt. Yeah, that definitely helps. And he's basically the age of all their professors. So like that, that really helps him out in general. But like I think because that's really the biggest difference between this year and last year was last year the QB play was really awful up until towards the end of the year. Finally, Bowman started to get it going a little bit towards the end of the year, and now that's starting to roll again this year. And I think if Bowman can actually have decent quarterback play, then Oklahoma State is thrown into the likes of Utah and Kansas State. And this game is a perfect example, right? You have the two oldest quarterbacks in the country going up against each other. And Cam Rising versus Alan Bowman. And it's really, I think, with the supporting cast for both Utah and Oklahoma State are so good overall. So which quarterback can propel their teams to that winning level? I personally think Cam Rising is much better. I mean, he should be at 56 years old, but I think that's what's going to propel Utah. But if Alan Bowman can do what it takes for Oklahoma State to get the dub, it's right there for the taking.
That's fair. I want to talk about a couple other teams in the conference before I hand it over to Bill. Kansas State, as you mentioned, is a team that is on the rise and that we expected, but their in-state counterpart, Kansas, has looked absolutely awful this year. In their first game, they did not look good offensively at all. Did you lose to Illinois and then UNLV? What's happening in Lawrence right now, and why is Jeff Brown so shitty at calling football plays? Or offensive football plays?
Yeah, no, the problem is that I'm going to say, everybody kind of hopped on the Kansas bandwagon last year, and deservedly so. Like Kansas was, they played really up. Lance Leipold, started getting a lot of credit for the job that he was doing at Kansas, and and all the things they were doing. The problem is, and I still believe this, and I believe this the entire time last year too. This roster still isn't that good, right? Like they have Devin Neal, who's a really good running back, and obviously Jalen Daniels. The reason why Jalen Daniels is a Heisman candidate or coming into the year as a Heisman candidate was because there was belief that he is so great, he's going to elevate this fairly mediocre roster, right? Him and Neal and Arnold are good enough to make it happen. And that's it. Like the defense was terrible last year. Like that hasn't changed. Like the defense was already bad, but it's just the offensive skill positions was able to rise the rest of the team. And I just think eventually that just wears on you. I think that's starting to happen here too, right? So even watching the Illinois, there's arguments that maybe Illinois and UNLV are better than expected, but it's still Illinois and UNLV, right? Like I'm not kind of buying that. I think Kansas, who came into this year, I saw people putting Kansas in the Big 12 championship game, and I said, this is just not that good of a team, not that good of a roster. And Lance Leipold, who I do think is a good coach, there's only so much you can do as a coach. And I look at this roster and I say, unless Jaden Daniels does have that Heisman caliber season, I do not see what some people were thinking of a 9-10 win season. And I think you're starting to see that already with this 1-2 record because Daniels hasn't had that great of a season, right? He hasn't been Superman like he's been in the past. And so when he's just not Superman, like it's not even that he's like Devin Neal's playing great, actually. Devin Neal's doing what he needs to do. But when Daniels isn't Superman or even okay, then this team's just going to flounder and they're going to look like Kansas.
Fair enough. I had two more questions before I hand it over to you, Bill. First one is what happened with Arizona? Like I understand massive coaching change, but you still have Fafita, you still have McMillan, you still have Maldonado on defense, you have some good pieces. What is going on, and how big of a loss is Johnny Nansen for them? Defensively.
Yeah, so I am here for Arizona not being good. Texas Tech plays Arizona in 2 weeks, and I'll actually be in that game in Tucson. And so I'm Arizona being a disappointment. I'm all for, right? Now I will say that to your point, I do actually still believe that Arizona is a school that does have, it's almost the opposite of Kansas. I do think Arizona is still chock full of talent. I just think they got whooped and beat down by a really good Kansas State team. I think that was really as simple as it is. I still believe in Arizona and their ability. I still think their defense is really good. I still think Fafita is really good. And like you mentioned, they are still getting adjusted to some of the coaching. But I think they just got the schedule was not easy for them. They have Kansas State, and then they have a bye going into Utah, right? Like, so that's back-to-back road game against the two teams that I believe are the two best teams in the conference. That's just really not fair. And so you get beat down on the road at Kansas State, which is a really good team. You're about to play Utah. Hopefully the bye week can help you, but it's still on the road in Utah before. And then after that, you get a little bit ease with, home against Tech, at BYU, home against Colorado. So you can hope you can rally off some wins before getting to the West Virginia UCF side of the schedule. But I really don't necessarily think that Arizona's falling off per se, even though that Northern Arizona team or game begs to differ. But I think it's really just they've really gotten hit with the bad part of the schedule. They're probably going to be 2-2 before they play that Tech team, and it's just not great for them in that aspect. But still, I still believe this is a pretty good defense.
I feel like Dwayne Aquino's calls have not been up to standard, and that's why we saw New Mexico put 39 points on them. But again, we just have to wait and see. Right, it's a process, as we all know. A part of that process is getting your non-conference games out of the way and then getting ready for conference play, which Colorado is about to do. What are your thoughts on the Buffaloes this year, and how successful do you think they're going to be in conference play?
Oh, Colorado. They're the funnest team to watch in football for all the wrong reasons. I think so. It's going to be interesting to see what they do in the Big 12 this year. And the reason I say that is that last year, if normally when any other year that 4 teams from the Pac-12 would have come to the Big 12, it would have been a step up in competition. Last year was probably the best year of impact for the Pac-12 in over a decade, 15 years, since the Reggie Bush man. Like the Pac-12 was stacked last year randomly. And so because of that, their 4-8 record last year, I think is going to not necessarily translate, but it is going to be, it's not a step up in competition moving to the Big 12. It's even, some people would argue it may be even, easier because you're not playing USC, you're not playing Oregon, you're not playing Washington, right? And so I'm curious to see how this does affect in. I will say this conference is full of Nebraskas. Like Nebraska is not this huge woolly mammoth of a team, of a program, right? I know Raiola is getting all the love and everything like that, and everyone's talking about some of the things that Nebraska can do, and I'm a little but I actually think the rest of the conference is full of Nebraska. So you getting whooped by Nebraska and a game that 28-10 is actually close. The score is closer than the game actually was. I think you're going to have like UCF, in my opinion, is just as good as Nebraska. K-State is better. Arizona is just as good, if not better, right? Utah's better. You're going to play Oklahoma State's better. All those teams are better than the team you just got whooped by, right? And so because of that, I do question just how good it is going to be. This Colorado team's going to be in conference, and every time I see Colorado on the news, right, it's for everything but football. It's a reporter getting kicked out of the press conference room. It's the quarterback refusing to shake hands. It's everything but how did you play like Colorado State. That should have been a situation where we're talking about, maybe this is a situation. This is a time on the road where Colorado can get their groove back a little bit and really prove that they've learned their mistakes in Nebraska. But instead, we're talking about Shedeur Sanders. So luckily for Colorado, they start their game, their conference play against the teams I think is pretty bad. Right, I think Baylor is a pretty bad team. I don't expect much from Baylor in this game. It's a home game for Colorado. It's on national TV, just what Coach Prime loves. And I do think, similar to the TCU game last year, that they're going to be able to make some magic happen if they can figure out who's wearing the right jerseys for that game. I don't know if y'all saw that, but both Baylor and Colorado planned white jerseys for this game and posted it. That's hilarious. But so that's going to at least help the schedule. But I kind of look at it and say they're 2-1 now. I see maybe 3 conference wins, maybe 4 at absolute. Like the goal for Colorado should just be get 4 in conference. And if they get 4 in conference, that is a successful year. That is a bowl appearance, and that should be the goal. All these other people talking about 8-4, 9, whatever. If they can get to 4 conference wins, Coach Prime, great job, right? I don't think I see it, but if they can do it, good job.
All right, Bill, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Excellent. Well, I've had a chance to warm up in the bullpen. So it has been, as you pointed out, a long time since they've had a chance, Texas had a chance to get to like double-digit wins. So my first question is, what do you think would have to happen for Texas Tech to be a team that maybe not consistently, but every few years, like a few years ago, another school with Tech in its name, Virginia Tech, used to be 8 wins, 7 wins, 9 wins, 10 wins, right? And about every 4 or 5 years, they would jump up to 10, 11 wins. What would it take for Texas Tech to, you're a talent-rich environment, the state of Texas, all that kind of stuff, to get to that point where every few years you're a double-digit team?
Bill, I would give nothing more than we don't ask for much. That's all we want. That's all we want. And so, and I think a lot of people were excited about Joey because of what he brings to that aspect, right? Because the thoughts about Lubbock was if you could recruit to Lubbock, the world is yours. It's something that Kingsbury just could not do. It's something that Wells just could not do. They could not recruit to Lubbock. They could not build depth in Lubbock. They couldn't do any of that. McGuire so far has found that aspect of it. I think the problem is that when it comes to getting talent in tow, that is no longer our problem. I think we have talent. We have talent. We talked about it. Our receivers good. We have a 5-star receiver, true freshman right now. The running back corral is pretty good. Defensively, a lot of guys were graduated last year, but we have the depth there defensively. I think the problem now is that now the talent is starting to kind of build itself at Tech. So now it needs to be a combination of the talent mixed with like just sound calling, sound development, like these guys really getting in and or not these guys getting in, but like the coaching being sound and developing these players. And I think Tim DeRuyter, the defensive coordinator, has actually done a decent job of this, right? Texas Tech has never been known for a defensive prowess or anything like that. But if you watch the Washington State game, the stats in that game is going to look at you and you're going to say, oh, man, the defense didn't play well. If you actually watch the game, the defense played about as good as you could possibly play when you're on your side of the 50 for virtually every snap, right? The Washington State started almost every drive at their 50, on their own 45, right, on their own on the Tech's 30, every drive. And so the defense did a lot of great job of holding the field goals, even stopping them on downs a couple times. And so that Tim DeRuyter defense in the last couple of years is one of the reasons why I think I give DeRuyter most of the credit for that first 8-5 season than McGuire does. I think defensively he's done well. So now that same development and talent influx we're seeing defensively has to happen on the offensive side of the ball as well as the play calling. And so that's the issue. I'm not going to sit here and say that Kitley needs to be gone, but I think he needs to fix it this year, right? It's also not a secret that Kitley wasn't McGuire's first choice. Sonny Cumbie was. If you remember, Sonny Cumbie was the interim head coach at Texas Tech before when Matt Wells got fired. Sonny Cumbie became the interim head coach at Texas Tech. When Joey McGuire got the job, he hired Sonny Cumbie to stay on at Tech to be the offensive coordinator. Sonny Cumbie actually got hired by Louisiana Tech to be their head coach, and he's not doing so hot. So I'm not saying I hope he gets fired so he can come back home, but it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I'll just put it like that, But I really think on the offensive side of the ball, it's kind of following the same formula of we have some of the offensive talent. Let's build them up. Let's develop them. And then let's also be sound with our play calling. Also, the only other thing that I would say is that, and I know a lot of Tech fans aren't going to like this, follow the Texas formula. Follow what Sark has done at Texas is the way that, and I know it's not easy because if everybody could do it, they could do it, but Tech has money. Like people don't really understand our NIL is it's top 20 in the country. I think at one point it was even top 10 in the country. And we have the big money boosters. Like we have money. So the thing about it, and I think one of the biggest reasons why Texas under Herman has been different than Texas under Sark is not because the recruiting rankings have changed. I remember I was talking to this before Sark was hired, that Herman always could recruit. Y'all were Texas for its top 5 recruiting the whole time Herman was there. The difference is that Sark, seeing what he learned from Nick Saban at Alabama, said the first thing we're going to do is recruit O linemen and D linemen. We're going to recruit from the trenches to start off. And Tech is always, as long as I've been a Tech fan, I've always had this problem, especially when you're playing Texas and Oklahoma. When you get off the bus, Oklahoma looks bigger. I'd be in the stands and I'm like, Oklahoma looks 3 times our size, right? And so now that Texas and Oklahoma are not in the Big 12 anymore, sure, you may not have that, but now why can't you be that? And I think that's still where we're getting the 5-star receivers, we're getting the 4-star corners, the 4-star quarterback, the 4-star running back. We're getting all these great skill players. But what's worked at Georgia, Alabama, Texas, LSU, Ohio State, Michigan, even during the Antonio days over at Michigan State is what's worked. The reason why USC has struggled to catch on under the Lincoln Riley days is because what wins college football games, it wins games at every level of football. Recruit, get guys in the trenches, and you'll be successful. The fact that both of our defensive tackles from last year that we called the law firm, Tony Bradley and Jalen Hutchin, both retiring, they're our 2 best players on defense. They're both gone. And you're already seeing that our run game and our pass rush is struggling because our 2 best defensive linemen are both gone. Like recruit in the trenches, improve the trenches, you'll be able to get something going.
Got it. Okay, so Let's talk some individual games coming up. Conference play is getting underway. We're getting some interesting matchups. Tell me what you think of Houston and Cincinnati that game, and do you think either of those programs will soon move up into the top tier of the conference? And if so, which one and why?
Hell no.
That was
no. Mind you, I technically should be a Houston fan. I got my master's from there. Like I should like the Cougs, and I've gone to a few games. They're fine, but like the Houston Cougars, it's funny because I think a lot of people when they were first introduced to the Big 12, a lot of people said, "Watch out for Houston. They're in Houston. They're going to be able to recruit well there. They're going to be able to do this, that, and the other. They're a sleeping giant and all this other stuff." And I just couldn't see it because the thing about it is Houston wasn't dominating the American Athletic.
Yeah.
Right? Once every 5 or 6 years they'd win an AAC, or 5 years they'd win an AAC championship. They weren't dominating the AAC. So because they're not even doing that, how do I expect them to all of a sudden do that in the Big 12? And they have been embarrassing since. Right? And so even with the new coach over there, and there's some thought of, okay, maybe it was just, it was just the old regime. Now we got new coaching in, we'll be better. And what do? How do you reward these loyal, all 5 of the loyal Houston Cougar fans? You lose 27-7 to UNLV, right? Now, I will say the Oklahoma game at least gives them some bit of thought to, maybe, right? Maybe we're turning the tide. But I still don't really see it from the Cougs. I think that the Cougars are a long ways away from competing and a long ways away from actually, because here's the thing is the Houston Cougars, they're not good at the things that are going to make you successful in college football, right? Like the thought of that, if you're in a big city, you're good. What major university is in a big city right now that wins games consistently? Alabama's in Tuscaloosa. Have you been to Baton Rouge? It's not a great city. Right? Like that doesn't matter as much. And what matters is money. And Houston doesn't really have the investment. Fertitta now finally says, listen, we just got to screw all the other stuff. Let's put money into the Cougs. So maybe if Fertitta opens up his wallet, maybe something like that happens, but he's too busy bringing in an NHL and a WNBA team to Houston, which we appreciate. Thanks, Fertitta. Don't worry about the Cougars. As far as Cincinnati, I also struggle to see them as a real threat, to be honest. I just think the level of competition in the Big 12 is bigger than the AAC, right? At least Cincinnati had more success in the AAC than Houston. But I think both teams are a ways away from being able to, one, build both rosters up to be able to compete on a week-to-week basis, and then two, get the financial support needed that most schools in big cities just don't get. I mean, why invest in the Bearcats when the Bengals are down the road, right? Why invest in the Cougars when the Texans are down the road? We're too busy watching C.J. Stroud. To watch Donovan Smith, right? Stuff like that. Now, I will say out of the freshman 4, the school, and we haven't talked about them too much, but the school that did worry me when they first, this is the school that I was like, watch out for them first and foremost, and I still believe that, is UCF, right? Because if you see UCF, Texas Tech is competing with UCF when it comes to top of the recruiting boards. They're recruiting with UCF and TCU when it comes to financial input. UCF from day one has proven to be a school that is willing to play with the big dogs. And it's something that Houston and Cincinnati just haven't done.
And how do you think that game turns out, Albie? How do you see that game?
Houston's at home, so I give them the leg up. Can I just say I don't care? Is that an answer?
That's the T-shirt. I don't know.
No, I'll say this. I do think Cincinnati's better. They lost to a decent Pitt team, and Pitt beat West Virginia. I don't know if that makes them decent or not, but I like to think at least Pitt's a decent team right now. But Cincinnati, I do think is a better roster currently. But Houston's at home, and I do give them a little bit more credence. It's a home game. It's early. Because it's early in Cincinnati's favor, the stadium will not be packed. I'm willing to bet money on that. But at the very least, it'll be in the friendly confines of TD-ECU Stadium. So I'm going to give it to the Cougars.
Okay. Next on the docket. This is a game I will be watching. Kansas and West Virginia. It's not exactly the backyard brawl. I don't know what you want to call it. They're not very close. but they seem to have developed a bit of a decent sized hatred somehow already.
Yeah, a little bit.
Albie, before you begin, I just want to point out something that Bill Carroll just said. This is one of the games he'll be watching. Like, he doesn't watch every single game of college
right, but you know what I mean. But
no, I don't.
Particular.
I don't know what you mean.
To delineate, I'll be watching this game particularly closely. Thank you, Brock. Okay, back to our guest. And before I was so rudely interrupted, continue with your answer, Albie.
You randomly see Bill tweet about like, oh man, this Howard Mercyhurst game is going crazy. Like, what?
at Jim Nagy, this player that plays in a Division III school that is currently 0-6 has a pass rusher that I'm telling you needs to go.
I'm like, all right. Oh, hey, I believe you. I'm not gonna see him.
The Michigan Institute of Technology for the Depth of Iowa in Idaho.
Did you see this linebacker from the Colorado School of Mines? He's crazy.
Yeah. This linebacker from Miami of Ohio of Tuscaloosa of California. Holy macaroni.
Oh my goodness.
You gotta get to this.
That's the purpose of the show. We can have a roast Bill hour later. So back to the game. West Virginia. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Kansas, West Virginia. Listen, I'm going to pick West Virginia in this game. I think West Virginia should be pissed about them losing the backyard brawl on the road. Again, they're back at home, so I do think they're a little. I think, have been again talking about the schedule. Kind of their non-con schedule was tough, right? This is a team that's supposed to be good this year in West Virginia. I still kind of think they're good this year. I think if they lose this game, I can throw away the thoughts of them being good because they should win. They're still favorites in this game, and they got to get back on the right track. If you lose this game, then the question of bowl eligibility starts creeping in, which is a question that I think most West Virginia fans weren't even thinking about.
Okay, gotcha. Let's work our way through the rest of this wonderful Big 12 schedule. Now, as things quote unquote heat up, I want to get an idea of what you think of. Iowa State's playing out of conference against Arkansas State. I think we all assume that's going to be a double-digit win for them. But I'm going to save Arizona State, Texas Tech for last. But now let's talk about Utah versus Oklahoma State. Now you talked about it a little bit, but give us your more sort of detailed breakdown of that game, and what do you think will be the determining factors in that game?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it before. I really think whoever can limit the other quarterback the most will be able to go away with the dub. And Oklahoma State is at home. They do, I've already talked about how much I like the home teams typically. But the difference here is that I do think Utah's I'm not necessarily sure if Utah's defense is better, but I think they'll have more success against Alan Bowman than Oklahoma State will have against Cam Rising. I make a lot of jokes about Cam Rising and Alan Bowman both being 38 years old. However, Cam Rising actually plays like an old man, like he's just smarter than everybody else in the field. Alan Bowman plays like he's senile and is just happy to be there, right? Just happy that the NCAA gave him a 35th year of eligibility. And so that, I think, is where if I had to put my trust in one quarterback over the other, I do give it to Cam Rising, right? I do think that with Oklahoma State, we were hoping that, Ollie Gordon, who hasn't yet wiggled fully free yet, might get something going. Stribling has actually had a pretty good year, a couple nice deep catches for him. So you're hoping that with that receiving staff that you were talking about earlier, as well as with the run game, maybe Oklahoma State can make some shape. But I just have faith and confidence in Cam Rising. Like, I just think that he is just a smarter quarterback than everybody else. And he has a little bit of Max Duggan in him, that when push comes to shove, game on the line, he will make the play. It's a 4th and 10, he will get 10 yards on the dot. It's a 3rd and 9, he will get 9 yards on the dot. He will do exactly what it takes to win the game, and I think it's going to come down to that last possession. I just trust Cam Rising more.
Yep, I can't argue with that assessment. Moving on.
I can't argue with that assessment either. But Bowman has like that Bo Nix aura about him, which is no matter the situation or coverage or score, he's gonna throw it. And
He's gonna throw it.
When you have
but let me tell you something.
Stribling, I gotta give it to the wide receiver.
Yeah, but let me tell you something. I still remember, and I will never forget, when Texas Tech was up by two scores against Texas, and he put the horns down, and we lost that game. Okay, we were up 2 scores with like 2 minutes to go. Yeah, no team should ever lose that game. Oh, no, I blame Alan Bowman. It wasn't his fault, but I blame him.
I mean, your Red Raiders lost me money, by the way. I had the Red Raiders in that game, so thanks for that boys, by the way. Also run the football next time. I'm saying.
Yeah. Yes. Facts.
Yeah.
Big facts.
But
Yes.
but
Matt
you know,
Wells.
let's you guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, Bowman the
Regardless.
Showman of Texas Tech and Michigan. And is there
Fun
another one?
fact: Alan Bowman's so old that Cliff Kingsbury recruited him to Texas Tech. By the way.
Yes, true.
Yeah,
That actually
because
is
he
a
was
factual
Mahomes'
statement.
replacement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep trying to remember what was the Oklahoma State quarterback that got drafted by the Browns.
Whedon?
Who is-
Whedon.
Brandon
Whedon.
Whedon.
Yes, right. So it's like I sort of think about it as like the Brandon Wheaton Bowl in this game. Like there should be an award given to whoever wins this, you know, for the best quarterback who is old enough to
Give him a
rent
knee brace. That's his award.
Right. The Brandon Wheaton Award is given to the quarterback who doesn't need a co-signer to rent a car. So
That's right. The winner gets their official AARP card.
there you go. In the battle of the three-letter teams, TCU, SMU. Tell me about that game. And of course, that used to be a conference game, going all the way back to the old Southwestern Conference days, but now it is not. But take me through that game for us, Mr. Albie Shore.
So don't let TCU fans tell you that they don't care about this game, right? Because TCU fans still do care about this game. They want to beat SMU so very badly. But it's funny. I was talking about this to Melissa Treebwasser, Coach Treebwasser on Twitter, and she was mentioning how the problem with this game is that if TCU wins, nobody cares because they're supposed to win. If TCU loses, all they hear about from SMU fans is just how much they're so much better. And so because of that, I still think TCU is going to win. I mean, TCU is still so much better than SMU. I don't care how much as TCU has embarrassed themselves at times, right? Recently, they are just worlds and above better than SMU. And SMU is like they shouldn't even like the fact that SMU is in the ACC is a little bit of a joke. And so I still expect TCU to win this game and win it. I know the line is pretty small. I actually think they're going to win it by 10 plus.
I would say
There we
that
go.
until they had you shit the bucket last week against UCF. They were up by multiple scores, and then to lose them the way they did, I don't know. But at the same time, for SMU, like they started out the season with a dud. I knew things were gonna be bad when they started singing their fight song after it against Nevada. I was like, oh, this is not a sign of a well-run program at the moment. But we hope they turn things around. Friend of the show, Alex Brown, is the director of player personnel, I believe, out there. So we just want to shout him out. Oh, he's at Ole Miss now?
He's been at Ole Miss since July, something like that. But yeah, he's been at Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Oh, so I don't have to be nice about SMU anymore?
You don't have
man.
to be nice to
Oh.
SMU. You can say whatever you want. All those horrible things you wanted to say about the SMU program, you can let them all spew out of you now. And I have a new segment.
Is so ass.
I know. I have a new segment we're going to have for you, Brock, called The Bitter Better. And it gives Brock a chance to vent about all the games that a team has deprived him of winning. So watch for that soon on Team MBS Media, The Bitter Better with Brock Vieira, as he just goes on and on about how someone has cost him what should have been, his hotel money or whatever he likes to save his money for. But working through the rest of the schedule, there's some other games of import, I guess is the term one might use, games that matter. We touched on Baylor and Colorado, the fight for the bottom of the conference. But I think we may have said enough about that. I want to spend some time on BYU and Kansas State. BYU, of course, at various points was going to be in about 3 or 4 different conferences, it seemed. I'm old enough to remember when they were in the WAC, as well as, of course, by the time they spent as an independent, they were in the Mountain West. Rumors of them joining the Big 12 back when that was a thing. And, of course, rumors of them joining the Pac-12 as well as the Big 12. Lots of rumors about BYU. But take me through this game and who wins and why, Mr. Albie Shore.
Yeah, BYU's, and I feel like this is going to be the case for them every year. Now that we start to cover them every year, I'm just not going to know much about this team. I'm not going to know what to think. Right, every year, the years that I think they're going to be bad, they're probably going to end up being good. The years I think they're going to be good, I think they're probably going to end up being bad. This year, I thought they were going to be bad, and they're 3-0 at this point. Right, the SMU game was a game they probably should have lost, and they ended up winning. The Wyoming game was a game that probably should have been close, and they ended up blowing them out. Right, Retzlaff it looks like Reslaff's going to be a good quarterback, which I didn't expect that. I thought Reslaff was going to be one of the worst quarterbacks in the conference, and he's killing it both in the air and with his legs. So I do, K-State's going to win. Like I'm not going to belabor this very much, but I will say that I think K-State needs to be prepared. Right, I'm going to predict a K-State victory, but they need to be prepared. This is a night game in Provo. It's going to be packed. Texas Tech played a night game in Provo last year and got embarrassed because it was the first Big 12 night game in Provo. This year, the first Big 12 night game in Provo is against Kansas State. K-State has got to be prepared, and K-State is also, don't have them look ahead to Oklahoma State the next week, right? Like, I'm going to pick a K-State victory, but they got to be on upset alert. Like this is setting up for something crazy from the BYU team. I just still question just how good BYU is. Again, I usually lean to the team that I just think is way more talented. I do think K-State's just way more talented, but I think Avery Johnson is more athletic than every single person on BYU's defense, and should be able to outrun them. But this is really sets up for a great trap game and a good upset by BYU.
I agree with you in that it has all the hallmarks of a trap game. Like it feels trap game-ish. Mm-hmm. I think at some point they get in trouble in this game and then they wake up, right, and fight their way out of the bag. But they're gonna throw some scare into their fans. I agree with you. I think there's gonna be some nervous stomachs.
Yeah, and also the flip side is that like, is Avery Johnson a good passer?
No.
Like that's the thing. Everybody was so excited coming into the season about what he can do, and yes, he's wildly athletic and how he can run, and you know how crazy we get when we see white boys that are very fast. But like, is he a good thrower of the football? And I don't know. I don't think this is the game we'll find out. If I'm Kansas State, I don't even let him throw the ball that often. Like throwing the ball as many times he has the past few games is a bit wild, if you ask me. I would just say, hey, man, this game, you see that defense? We're just going to run. We're RPOing everything, right? We don't need 23 attempts in this game. We may not even need 15. We're going to RPO everything. We are going to, and when I say RPO, I really mean RO. Take out the P most of the time.
Yes.
All right. A read option for the most part. Right. But yeah, no, I do think that eventually, to your point, Bill, like, they're just better. They're going to wake up. They're going to keep it going. But BYU has the ingredients to put a big scare into them.
I'd just like to add that the atmosphere of Provo is even more electric because the fans are rowdy and none of them are drunk. So that's just pure emotion and hatred.
Will they be?
That'd be chock full of that caffeine-free diet.
No, they're
ready to go.
Like I think you understand the excitement in that stadium. Half the people there just got engaged like 2 minutes ago. They just met their spouse 5 minutes ago. So it's a whole emotional circus right now for those phenomenal fanatics at Brigham Young University.
I assume. Well, we'll touch briefly on Iowa State, Arkansas State, because I want to spend the last portion of your time with us talking about, of course, the Texas Tech game. Is there any chance that I keep saying Arizona State, that Arkansas State hangs around, does anything interesting, or do you think that Iowa State just rolls?
So Iowa State has never rolled anybody, so it's going to be, it's going to be closer than it should be. But yeah, it should like a 21-point win. You know what I mean? Like that's probably where we're looking at. But don't expect like a huge blowout, right? Because they don't have it in them. I think they could be playing the Sister Mary Catherine's, nun school down the street and still only win by 3 touchdowns. That's just, they don't blow anybody out. It will be an Iowa State win. They are a really good team. They're a really sound team. It just won't be the blowout that you're expecting.
Okay, now the moment that everyone has been waiting for, we get to finish up with, of course, Texas Tech. Texas Tech, the sturdy Red Raiders, find themselves in a potential turning point kind of game. Obviously, the Sun Devils are coming on with a lot of momentum. They've played above my expectations, at least, and they're going to try to see if they can escape the state of Texas with back-to-back wins. So, what do you think are the keys to this game? And, what happens for Arizona State to win? What happens for Texas Tech to win this game?
Yeah, so I mentioned it on the Tortillas and Takes podcast, plug, that I think one of the keys is that they've got to really I mentioned it, they really need to show Arizona State what Big 12 football is all about. Playing hard-nosed, playing physically, and then also making sure to contain Arizona State's quarterback, right? Their quarterback has done a really good job this year, I think, both in the air and on the ground, right? And so I think that's one of the main things. It's always Texas Tech defenses have always struggled against running quarterbacks. Mateer is a great example. He was able to run all over the place. So Sam Leavitt, the quarterback for Arizona State, is going to have to, or he's going to want to run against his defense. But he's just good enough to pass it. But when you get him on the run, bootlegging out, throwing on the run, getting yards with his legs, that's when he's at his most dangerous. So I do want Tech to not just contain him, but contain him and make him work for it, make him actually do some things. And then also, the main thing is that I think you're going to want Sam Leavitt to beat you, but with his arm, right? And not, like I said, not using his legs. Cam Scatabo is probably the guy on Arizona State that everybody talks about more than anybody. He is, last year had a really good season, busted off like a 200-plus yard game this year. But here's my hot take is that Cam Scatabo, I'm not as worried about him. Not as worried about Cam Scatabo. I think defensively, we've actually done an okay job in the run game. It's been the quarterbacks that have killed us, especially with the running quarterback. I think one of the reasons why we did so well against North Texas is because Chandler Morris can't run. So it helps us in that aspect, right? And so I think Scatabo is not who worries me as much. I think outside of that 262-yard performance he had against Mississippi State, he hasn't really done much against both. Last week, for example, against Texas State, Scatabo was locked up. They had him in chains, right? And so I actually expect a very similar game to that Texas State game where it's Sam Leavitt having to come through. The Leavitt-Tyson show, Tyson, their lead receiver, who also, funny enough, is I believe the brother of Jalen Tyson, who used to play basketball over at Tech. So yeah, that little combination there is what worries me a little bit more. But I do have Tech winning that game, 38-34. So a little bit more high scoring than the Texas State game. I think the offense actually gets something going, similar to what we saw at Texas State. And I also think the defense helps the offense get some points with some turnovers. But close game, and I got Texas Tech winning it, but it is a close game. Like, I don't think this is what game where we're going to say, we're back to our 8-9 win preseason prediction. It'll be like, whoo, all right, well, we got another one, I guess.
Okay. So we've dealt with, individual games and the way the conference is perceived. I want to talk a little about pro prospects. Now, I know it's early, and I'm not just going to sign anything in blood, right? But there are some pro prospects. You mentioned one or two of them already. About the guy, think about maybe 5 to 10 players that you feel fairly strongly are going to play on Sundays, and give them to me, and which ones are maybe some of your particular favorites and why.
Ooh, that's a good question. Interesting. So, I think the easiest ones I would say is definitely Ollie Gordon, right, from Oklahoma State, Taj Brooks from Texas Tech, Devin Neal from Kansas. Like, I could rattle off 5 to 10 running backs in this conference alone that I think is going to play on Sundays, right? I think Avery Johnson will be a nice third string backup for a few years as well. That'll make some magic happen there. As a backup. One guy to mention, if I had to talk about it here on the Arizona State team, I do think that Miles Rouser, the safety for Arizona State, that guy is a guy that you see him out there playing free. You see him out the line playing strong, and I think that's the type of guy. The first time I saw him play, and then the next day I saw he had a neck tat, and I'm like, that checks out. Like, that's just the way he actually, and I'm going to say this again, and when I say this comparison, I'm not saying that he's as good as this guy, but I'm saying that he plays similarly to him, and that's Jalen Petrie. Again, not saying he's as good as Petrie, but they do play similarly, right? I think that's very important to state, right? And so, but yeah, I think he's definitely a very popular guy, and one that I'm pretty excited for there. But yeah, I do think there's some other guys I think on the defensive side of the ball to also keep an lookout for. But I think this year is really going to kind of make or break some of these players and whether they're going to play on Sundays or not.
Okay. Brock, do you have any other questions for our guest, Mr.
No.
Sure.
No, I think I took him through the ring enough about Tech, and he's been so gracious enough to, be a good sport about it. I just want to say thank you for coming on the show, Albie. Always a pleasure talking with you. And I hope Tech gets it together soon because football is better when the Red Raiders are actually, good.
Hey, we all hope, brother.
So before you go, please tell everyone where they can find your work, where they can follow you, and of course, where they can listen to the world famous, often imitated but never duplicated, Tortillas and Takes podcast.
Absolutely. So Tortillas and Takes podcast, everywhere you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Pods, all that jazz. Make sure to go look us up there. We're also on Twitter, Tortillas and Takes. And that's Twitter. Mama called it Twitter, so I'm going to call it Twitter. So find us on there. My Twitter is at Mr_Albie ALBIESHORE. And yeah, I'm on Twitter everywhere that you they don't do TweetDeck anymore. So, but anywhere else there, make sure to follow me. I crack jokes a lot on there. Usually at Red Raiders' expense because that shit's just easier that way. But it's a good time. It's a good time over on the verse there.
Yes, it is. I highly recommend it. It is a good time. Brock, do you have any quick things you want to throw in about UNLV? Earlier, there was some backhanded compliments or semi-shade about you losing to UNLV, which I think you may want to update your assessment of UNLV football, Albie. That it's not your father's or even your older brother's UNLV football. Those kids no longer wake up at noon and vomit before every practice. It's a little different there now.
It's true. It's not even my UNLV when I was going there anymore. That was a bad time. But UNLV is back on the rise. I just want to say that they are playing like a Power 5 program right now. 2 wins over Power 5 opponents. They open up conference play next week against Fresno State, and then they host Syracuse the week after, going for their 3rd Power 5 win. They're able to beat the Orange. They are a sleeper for college football playoffs. They are definitely, a team that's on the rise. They have a very good coaching staff, one of the more brilliant offensive minds in the country, Brennan Marion. They have a very strong defensive presence in Barry Odom. Jackson Warder is one of the best linebackers in the country, without a doubt. I think that's a player that you're going to see a lot on Sundays moving forward. Ricky White III is a player that you should definitely watch out for. He's been up and down this season, but I expect him to get his groove back once we enter conference play. And, watch some UNLV tape. And everyone's talking about the offense, but the defense is where they make their money. And the fact that they were able to beat Kansas in the way that they did when they could not establish a passing game at all, that's a bigger credit to that coaching staff and the entire staff in the building for recruiting, developing, and then finally succeeding in the game of football.
Yep. I heartily agree. I think this is a program on the rise. They're in one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas of the country. They are putting, to quote our guest, money into the program. And yet another program with the Fertittas, I guess, somewhat tied into it as well.
Yes.
So I'm going to give people another game to watch, right? Or maybe a game or two to watch as you're filling your brain and eyes and whatever else with college football. This is really going to be a decision week. We're going to find out some teams are indeed, quote unquote, for real. Clemson and NC State is a game that some people might not be usually excited about. Clemson's going to try to get its 800th victory. And this is actually another game that has a nickname. It's called the Textile Bowl for those that are into that kind of thing. Wow. They would become, I know. If Clemson does win, they'll become the 14th FBS program to reach the 800-win mark. They are the number 25 passing offense in the country, and they have the number 19 in passing efficiency. NC State has not beaten Clemson in Death Valley since 2002, but they did win 2 of the last 3 meetings versus Clemson. CJ Bailey will be making the start at quarterback for NC State. And Casey Concepcion, speaking of pro prospects, if you're looking for pro prospects, Casey Concepcion is a very interesting, exciting wide receiver. He's number 13 in the country in receptions per game and in receiving touchdowns. Think about, I guess, to think another NC State guy, think about Jacoby Myers, but faster, right? Similar body type, but he can run. Like he pulls away from people in the open field in a way that Jacoby can only dream of. I think that Clemson rights the ship a little bit in that game. Not a blowout, but you stretch the imagination. I think it's going to be compelling and close. But yeah, I could see somewhere in that 9 to 12 point victory in a game that will be much tougher than people believe in the ACC. Watch for James Madison, who, only a couple of years in the FBS, but they know how to play football. It's a tough program. They're going to give North Carolina a run for their money. North Carolina will win the game, but it will not be a blowout. I think it's at the most 13 to 17 point range on that one. And one more game. Shout out to our friend Jeffrey Fan, who we usually bring on to talk ACC football. We talked about sort of trappish games or whatever. Now, people should see Georgia Tech coming right now. But Louisville is going to be facing them in a 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central, 1:30 Mountain, and 12:30 Pacific game. And Georgia Tech, I didn't realize they only played each other 3 times in their history. That's a shocker to me. But Georgia Tech holds the 2-1 lead in that game. They both have been really good on offense, right? Both of these are explosive, interesting offenses. The thing that surprised me is they both have top 6 rushing defenses in the ACC. They both are averaging less than 100 yards per game. But my prediction-ish is that one of these teams is going to break through that and rush for way more. I'm thinking about 180 yards. And I think that might be Georgia Tech. I think Georgia Tech might get their running game going. If Georgia Tech gets the running game going, they probably win. Louisville's actually the favorite. So I guess that would be, technically speaking, an upset. But also Louisville has played a softer schedule than Georgia Tech. So we're just really figuring out who's good. We're now at the point in the season we got to see which teams are actually doing something. But the one thing I'll say is I could be sleeping a little bit on Louisville's defense. Now, once again, they haven't played against a bunch of really explosive offenses, but they're only allowing 28 first downs to this point in the season. So that's less than 9 first downs per game thus far. That's a crazy number. Yes. While Georgia Tech is number 4 in the season amongst all FBS programs in first downs from 89. They're one of 8 teams in the FBS that has not allowed a single sack this year, which is some of that's due to Hayes King, some of that's due to their offensive line. And only Rutgers, of all people, at Oklahoma State are amongst the other power 4.2s that have not allowed a sack so far. If Georgia Tech gets its second win in ACC play after, putting a bit of a whooping on Florida State during the Aer Lingus College Football Classic, that could signal that Georgia Tech is for real-ish. But, that remains to be seen because they will have beaten a ranked opponent at that point. And is there anything else that you want to shout out about college football this week before we close out the show?
Yeah, for all those watching, there's a game that's going to start in 30 minutes. I think you guys should watch. That's going to be San Jose State versus Washington State. I wrote a preview about it here at Team MBS Media, so give it a read if you guys get a chance. But this is going to be a game that's going to be a lot of fun to watch, without a doubt. You have 2 very explosive offenses, 2 very brilliant offensive-minded coordinators, and 2 teams looking to rewrite the narratives that have been attached to their programs for a very long time. Both teams are 3-0 right now. Washington State is coming off a victory in the Apple Cup. The first one since, I believe, 2021 or 2020. I think 2020 was the last time they won. They have a very good quarterback in John Mateer. His passing is a bit erratic, to say the least, but his ability to run is just phenomenal, as we already talked about on this show. On the opposite side, San Jose State has a tremendous passing attack with their spread and shred offense conducted by Craig Stutzman. He takes a little bit of the air raid, a little bit of the run and shoot, a little bit of your typical spread concepts, and he kind of combines it into an attack that is very, very hard to defend. There's 2 wide receivers, 1 play for each team. Kyle Williams for Washington State and Nick Nash for San Jose State. Those are two players that have been putting up massive numbers recently. And trust me when I say that if you're looking for a game that's definitely going to be entertaining, two, that's going to educate you on where offense is going to go for the next 5 to 6 years, and then three, as a game that could potentially help clear up a little bit of the confusion of the landscape of what the Pac-12 will look like next year. This is a game for you. The last thing I want to mention is that Oklahoma begins SEC play this week against Tennessee, where former beloved son and then turned into a very tumultuous relationship. Josh Heupel makes his return to Norman with a Tennessee squad that to me is among the country's best. They look like one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country right now. Nico Imaleva, I apologize for butchering his last name, is looking like a very, very good quarterback. They have really good players, Squirrel White, James Pierce, just to name a few. Of course, they have a incredible running back. What is his name? Is it Sampson is his last name, Bill? Do you remember?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. So who absolutely torched NC State a couple weeks ago. This is a game that I think is going to establish Tennessee as being one of the true contenders for the national championship this year. On the other end, for Oklahoma, this is a big game for them. There has been a lot of question about the play of Jackson Arnold, the play calling of the trail. How does Brent Venables measure up to other coaches in college football, especially the SEC? And does Oklahoma have a future in the SEC with Venables as their head man? I think a lot of where Oklahoma actually is in the grand scheme of things will be revealed to us in this game. So that's the last thing I want to touch on. I just want to tell everyone to have a great weekend. So many great games. It's, for a lot of teams, it's the beginning of the conference play. And this is when we really get to the nitty-gritty of the season where, one loss can change your entire season. And the same breath, one win can shoot you up the polls as well. So enjoy it. I want to tell everybody, thank you guys for watching. Like and subscribe here at Team MBS Media. And definitely can't wait to do this again with you, Mr. Bill Carroll. Yeah,
I want to say also to all those that wished me well during my recent birthday, thank you also so much. This has been a great time, exciting time, and of course, college football, right? Anything that I'm glad that college football is going on, that we got through COVID-19, we got through people thinking the world would end when NIL came into play, and hey, college football somehow is still going on. So college football survives a lot of things. It survived a couple of world wars, survived, when they way too prematurely canceled Superstition on Sci-Fi. Still mad about that. But we are now here. Enough about that. We're here. We are now in the meat, right? The beginning of the meat of the college football season, everyone. And so I'm excited. I'm happy. And go enjoy yourselves. Do something fun. And of course, watch college football because college football is awesome. Thank you once again. And we will see you again in 1 week.